Hello, I'm Ben Ward. This is my developer commentary for a interactive comic I did called The Often Ending Story. So this was originally a Twine game, text only, that I wrote for Idle Thumbs. They had, at a previous games conference, I think it was GDC and a Games Expo or something, they had made a physical newspaper that they handed out to people, and they were going to do another one, and they asked me to write something for it. So what I did was I wrote a little choose your own adventure thing, so that each page of the newspaper would have a little passage from this choose your own story thing in the bottom corner or whatever. So people would be walking around the expo flipping back and forth in this newspaper playing this game, was my idea. But they ended up not making that second newspaper for whatever reason, so I just published it as a Twine game. And then eventually I was making an interactive comic for an Idle Thumbs game jam, and I was waiting for the engine to, because it was in alpha, I was waiting for it to get beefed up and polished a little bit more. So I thought, while I'm waiting for that, I'll spend the first part of my dev time making my Twine game, The Often Ending Story, into an interactive comic, just as practice, get used to my new graphics tablet and get used to the engine, and kind of give feedback to John, who was making it, and try and get some quick improvements to the engine. So hopefully halfway through my game jam time, I would be able to move on to the proper game, Bluehad Christmas, and have plenty of time to do that. It ended up that I spent too much time doing this one, and so I decided to put it into the Bluehad Christmas game as an optional kind of offshoot little game that you could play. What I did afterwards was split it out into its own game, so it now sits alone here, and it is what we are looking at. The title panel is dreadful. It's kind of supposed to be intentionally like a dreadful montage movie poster, where they just take a load of clips from the film and a load of images and just kind of slap them on haphazardly. It is supposed to look crap, but it probably came out a bit more crap than I was intending, but there you go. So you start off with Amnesia. So because this was for a games conference, I poke fun at loads of video game narrative storytelling conventions. Basically, that's what I'm doing through this whole thing, and just doing it via a very bland, generic fantasy setting. So you wake up with amnesia with no clothes, like, with your basic undergarments on, and amnesia is another trope. And you've got a try again device. It's this game's equivalent of a quick load, so that you don't have to go back to the beginning of the game each time. You can just go back to the before the decision that you made that killed you. This is a reference to Outcast, which had you had some magic alien device called the quick save device. It was really a really cheesy kind of meta thing, so I'd kind of homaging that here with the try again device. So here comes your first choice. It's like a nice simple, you go left or right. This is like a visual. For someone who hasn't played an interactive comic before, or whatever, or Quine game, then this is to say to them, right, this is what's going to be happening. You're going to be given choices, and you click on the pink highlight and decide which way you want to go. The default colour for these was a kind of amber orange type colour, and it really didn't work with the brown beige parchment I'd decided on, so I made it pink instead. I think it worked a lot better with John's Mike Mignola Hellboy style art that he was going for, but not for my stuff, so I made it pink. The art style, my plan was to make it really simple so that I could do it really quickly and just bash through, but I ended up making it more complicated than I had intended, and it took longer than I had hoped. Another mistake of mine. So I'll go left, and so this is immediately undercutting the amnesia thing and just getting rid of it. So that's a little joke. Moving on to the next thing is a graboid from the movie Tremors, of which I am a real fan. And so you can either clamber onto the rock or pick up the spanner or monkey wrench. I think I've cheated the perspective here, and I can't remember if I did it on purpose or not. But if you get on the rock, you suddenly realise that the rock is very, very small and certainly not going to help you with the graboid. I'm not sure whether I intended to troll the player with that, or whether they were supposed to use their Tremors knowledge to realise that wasn't going to work. But there you go. Doesn't work. You get gobbled by the graboid. And then Grim Fandango reference and a Dig reference. It's a little jibe at the LucasArts adventure, The Dig. And this is one of the most notorious puzzles here, is the putting the turtle skeleton back together puzzle, and so that's why the dig is hell. So you use your try again device and you get to make a different choice. I think originally in the text version I called this a monkey wrench, so it was a reference to the notoriously unfair Monkey Island 2 puzzle. Suddenly going, do you see the graboid was actually majestic and it's sad that you killed it? It's a trendy indie Shadow of the Colossus type twist that a lot of games try to do now. This is kind of stuff that we'd poke fun at in Lair of the Clockwork God as well when I made that with Dan and Science 5 Games. We were kind of playing around with similar stuff. So you can walk on with a tear in your eye, deciding whether you're sad or not about it. Is kind of poking fun at very binary, simple video game choices to try and reflect complex psychological reactions. So we walk on with a tear in our eye because obviously it was sad, and that gets you to this corridor, and so suddenly you're in a very modern, bland corridor with modern doors and a gun and everything. So I'm purposefully kind of mixing and matching genres and time settings and stuff here, and so now you're in a corridor shooter. This is kind of a joke about like RPGs and stealth games and stuff where, you know, the game wants you to be clever and careful and considerate and consider your moves and everything, but it often turns out that the best way is to just brute force your way through. So if you actually try and be careful here, then you get foiled by fast zombies. And another narrative trope is that you wake up and it's all a dream. Obviously that's a very, very old trope, but here you're a successful interactive comic writer. I think I had to come up with a few more endings for when I made this into a comic rather than a text thing. This was a satirical commentary on events at the time where Penny Arcade were neck deep in all that Dick Wolf stuff, and they just were not handling it very well. They were doing that thing where they got called out on something, and instead of apologising sincerely and learning from it, they just dug in and started embracing the more right-wing fan base that would just go and assure them that they hadn't said anything wrong at all, actually, and they were fine. So because that's easier to hear, it's the whole J.K. Rowling thing. It's because the people telling you that you did nothing at all wrong are the awful people. You just end up turning yourself into a bigot just because that's where all the yes people are for you. But then you go back and you just try the brute force method, and that gets you through. So you get to the end of game baddie, EOGB, and of course in FPSs and stuff they've always got like a big flashing weak spot that you have to shoot at. It's always very incredibly unsubtle. So this guy's just got a big pink medallion around his neck saying end of game baddie. So you shoot that, it explodes into gibs, kind of Quake style, nice low texture 3D lumps of flesh, which is what I was trying to achieve there with the art. And then this gag is from the original, and it basically is just like puts you into a time loop where you win you ostensibly win the game, but then you fall down a hole, knock your head and get your amnesia, and you're right back to where you started. So I carried that over. So let's take the path not travelled. And so here, this is a reference to like character creation. You keep your amnesia, but you just decide who you're going to be. So this is just a diegetic version of a standard character creation menu. And of course, with RPGs and stuff, it always turns out that you're the chosen one. So you have to pick your particular messianic prophecy that you want. So we get onto a pretty standard fantasy platforming section with lots of booby traps, and it's hopefully pretty obvious what you should be doing. You shouldn't you probably want to duck if there's a big sharp Indiana Jones scythe coming at you. Another trope is the turns out it was all a VR game or whatever. Some on the nose commentary from me saying that the trouble with those twists is that then the entire story is someone played a game and it doesn't mean anything. So who cares about anything? Like the twist of Life on Mars, which was a British drama starring John Sim. He was a cop who got in a car accident. He finds himself in the 70s, and it's all very politically incorrect 70s cop drama. And the question through the whole show is, has he actually gone back in time? Is he still in his coma? Did he die, and is this heaven? It turns out that he was still in his coma, and then he wakes up, but then he's so bored with real life that he jumps out of a building and kills himself so that he can go back there. So the whole story is, there was a cop, he got hit by a car and went into a coma, and then he woke up and then he killed himself, and that's the entire story. And it's like, well, then that's the most boring story ever. So, well done for doing an amazing twist, but you kind of wasted hours of storytelling on nothing. That's the kind of thing I was referring to there. So you successfully duck, you can see holes on the floor, so you can imagine that spikes are going to come out, so probably best, but hopefully you will realise that if you dive left or right, there's nowhere for you to go to, so you just fall down a hole. Similar twist again, virtual reality game. Oh, that's the same twist in fact, so there you go. Yep. ducking won't help you either because the spikes are going to come out. So you get the same Grim Fandango ending. This time you jump and you get to, because it's action, I let the player kind of click on some stuff. So you grab the rope, you grab onto the stairs, you go through the saloon doors. So if you go through this door, you get to the zombie corridor, so you can go back out and give up on that. Some more satire here of the objectification of women in video games. It's kind of very similar stuff to what we did in Been There Done That. In fact, this is kind of the Duke Nukem approach, which gets you killed. Or you can do what you see a lot of players doing in playthroughs, which is when they're playing like Tomb Raider or Half-Life or whatever, they will always just try and angle themselves at the best position to admire female NPCs or female player characters' arse or whatever. Just really getting far too much prurient enjoyment out of a bunch of polygons. Like I say, tediously sexualized. And it's not all the gamers, obviously, it's also the designers just making every female character just ridiculously, skimpy outfits and unbelievable body shapes and that kind of thing. And then it's another very similar twist where you are on a holodeck rather than a dream, or whatever. It's basically the same twist as that virtual reality one. Dialogue from the person shouting at you is incredibly clumsy exposition, which is, again, kind of poking fun at video game writing. And then we go into the toilet, you can pick up various stuff, and at this point you get the choice of going into one of two extended pop culture references. So this one, the Frozen door, gets you to Big. So if you've watched the Tom Hanks movie Big, you will hopefully notice that this is the adventure game that he plays when he's a kid, and he can't solve it, and then by the end of it, because he's gone through character arcs, he now has the wherewithal to solve the game and complete it. So this is all straight from the movie, as all these prompts are straight from the movie. This is the kind of thing that when I was a kid I'd watch these and think, wow, you'd see these text parsers that just react to anything the protagonist types in just perfectly, and it got me really excited. I think like, wow, I'd love to play, I really want to play a text adventure. And when I finally get to text adventures, it was just impossible. I just typed stuff in and the parser wouldn't recognise what the hell I was talking about, and it was just incredibly difficult. I gave up very quickly. As Tom Hanks' character Josh learnt, you have to throw the thermal pod at the ice wizard. Now, I don't remember in the film whether he did that as an adult. I think he did. I think this is all accurate to the movie. He plays it while he's still an adult, and so you've got a couple of options here. If you tell her the truth about you being a child in an adult's body, that follows the plot of the movie through to the end. But then when you show back up at home as your 8-year-old Josh self again, it carries on after the events of the movie and it kind of extrapolates out logically. Well, obviously the FBI would want to know where you were and like who kidnapped you and whatever. And then it branches off from there, and there's various different things where if they find out about your magic body change, then you get locked up in a secret lab somewhere for the rest of your life and that kind of stuff. They all end up pretty dark and dystopian. This splits off from the narrative of the movie, and it's just everything's very successful. You decide to stay an adult forever. Also, I tried to pick pop culture references that were relevant to the game. So because Big revolves around an interactive comic, that fit quite well for my interactive comic. So that's why I picked Big, really. But also it worked well because he had that video game in it. So that all worked well. In fact, this is a utopian kind of bittersweet ending because you steer the human race in a good direction. But for your global corporation building, I traced over the OCP building from RoboCop, so maybe a little hint that maybe this future isn't as bright as the narrator is telling you. Maybe this is unreliable narration. I can't remember if I got that Macmillan logo from the film or not, but probably found it. So basically it turns out that you are just you don't grow old as a normal person. You're immortal, and you just kind of shrivel up into this weird star child thing. And so for that, I got Tom Hanks's beardy face from Castaway and plonked that on. That might be something from Benjamin Button, that little weird crinkly baby body. I'm not sure. So I found old beardy Tom Hanks and put him on there as well. However, if you had gone the other way, this turns into a Magnum PI reference. I realised that I've given the player thermal pod and I can't remember what these sticks are. It's in the Magnum episode. He's hacking into Higgins's security software, and for some bizarre reason Higgins is put a Dungeon Master style game in as a security measure, and Magnum's trying to beat it, and he's got 2 magic wands that he can use or something like that. And I realised that I'd given the player both, so I kind of had to give them the option of using the thermal pod. Warning wands. Yeah, so if you try to throw the thermal pod, it kind of gives up and says, no, that's the wrong place. You should have... This is kind of classic sci-fi game writing, is where you get yourself into a corner and you just go meta with it, and you just break the fourth wall and go, no, that's not the thing that you're supposed to do. So, but hopefully that's also works as a tease to get the player to be interested in going back and trying the other door. But frankly, it was just because I realised that I didn't want to do the branching where you pick either the thermal pods or the warning ones, and then maybe you go into the wrong place and you don't have the right thing. Far too much bother, and that wouldn't be fun. So this is more fun. So all of this stuff, again, like the big one, all these narrative prompts on the scrolls are from the episode. This is actually what the game says to Magnum, and this is actually the Dungeon Master thing. That is actually from the game as well. This all happens in the game, in the episode. And then from there, I just skip right to the end of the entire Magnum PI series. The Magnum PI series does have a happy ending, but obviously there are fan theories that when Magnum got shot one time, he actually died, and the happy ending was the afterlife. And I'm poking fun at fan theories here because whenever any character gets shot or whatever, there's always a fan theory gets made like, oh, well, maybe they died and the rest was blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, A, that's a really unimaginative fan theory to plump for, and B, that would just be that would be a very boring twist, wouldn't it? If that was the thing, is that would render the story rather unsatisfactory. It's like, and then he died, the end, and also here's what the afterlife looked like, but that doesn't really matter. It's not like in a series where, and I won't spoil it, but it's not like in a series where that is explicitly what they're showing you, but they also give you a proper ending, so their death actually means something. It's not like the story just stops abruptly when they die, and then they spend the last season of the show in an afterlife that doesn't really mean anything. It's like, well, if your fan theory is correct, then that's pretty crap, isn't it? That's a pretty crap series. So let's just assume that actually it all happened. So I've just noticed there are some references in the code there. There's 101, which I suppose might be a Orwell reference, but there's also 1138, which is a Star Wars reference or George Lucas reference more generally, and CRM 114, which is a Kubrick reference. There's a device in Doctor Strangelove which has that code on it, and I think there's something in Space Odyssey as well, and then in Clockwork Orange there's a potion, like a medicine, a serum 114 as well, and that gets referenced occasionally in I think Back to the Future referenced it, and maybe some other places have referenced it. I like having a little collection in my head of pop culture references that are just numbers and letters to bring out whenever I need a code or a password or whatever, and that is one of them. So that is the end of this commentary. I won't go back through and find all the little nooks and crannies, because if you really want to see them, you can go and play it yourself. I'm kind of actually moderately happy with that. The art style came out quite well, considering, and there's lots of funny jokes and stuff in there, and it's all very Ben Ward / Size 5 style humour, so quite happy with it. It's not massively polished, but like all the branching and stuff works quite well, all the loops and everything work quite well, and there's lots of branching on it. There's lots of different stuff to see and loads of different pop culture references and satire and stuff like that to enjoy, so I'm actually quite happy with that. It's possibly a bit of a shame that it's a little ugly, but probably puts some people off, but moderately happy with that one. Thank you for listening.